It's the Real Estate Podcast, brought to you by ANZ Home Loans for financial well-beings.
Hey, welcome back to the Real Estate Breakfast as we follow the Australian property market together. Yeah, just trying to keep on top of what is going on from week to week, month to month. It is a lot easier said than done to keep one step ahead, especially in this ever-changing property cycle that we are in. Another weekend of property viewings. They are coming up on this shortened week for most. There might be some inspections that you're doing, auctions, or perhaps that drive-by. Don't just drive by too. Get out of your car and take a walk around the suburb. Better still, if you've got a bicycle, bike around the neighbourhood. You will be able to just take in so much more about that suburb. Now, if you're enjoying the podcast, leave us a review on Spotify or Apple and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us connect with more people just like you who are interested in our real estate knowledge bank. We are independent media. We are not a real estate company, but we are playing with the larger online property organisations that are out there. It is a Friday, June the 12th. On this day back in 1987, do you remember Ronald Reagan with the Berlin Wall saying, "Tear down this wall"? That happened on this day. And also on this day back in 1994, FIFA World Cup USA, that officially opened. Now, we're in Sydney this morning, so we better look at the Sydney listings because property listings across Sydney have increased noticeably compared to last year, giving buyers more choice and more negotiating power. Agents at the moment, they're reporting a growing number of sellers trying to exit before conditions potentially soften even further. Days on market are stretching out across many suburbs. And Sydney's ultra-premium market is splitting into two different scenarios. Trophy homes and elite waterfront assets are still attracting wealthy buyers quickly, while the $3 million to $5 million market is slowing due to finance restrictions and borrowing pressures. So off the back of that, let's take you to Sydney and catch up with Rich Harvey from PropertyBuyer. Yes, Sydney's auction clearance rates, they remain soft. They're sitting around that low 50% range, with buyer confidence now feeling somewhat fragile. It's all happening, isn't it, for 2026? How are you finding it?
Yeah, great to be back on the podcast again with you, Craig. And yes, we have noticed a discernible change in the Sydney property market and also other markets right around Australia. Auction clearance rates beginning of the year were sort of getting close to 70% and then rapidly declined now to the 50% level, even lower in some suburbs. So whereas you would have had, 5 to 6 bidders at an auction earlier in the year, now you're lucky to get 2. We're often seeing, agents grabbing onto buyers and doing deals pre-auction. So it's a wonderful time and it's very rare, these windows that open up, I've got to tell you. These softer markets don't last for that long. I think this one will last maybe 6 months or so. So a lot of people are hesitating at the moment, but we're finding that the market is a great time, particularly if you're an upgrader. If you are thinking of upgrading your home, you're not going to get nearly as much as you thought when you're selling your home. But then if you're buying a higher price property, there's going to be a bigger discount. So the changeover cost is ending up to be lower. So there's one opportunity for buyers right now in the market, Craig.
Yeah, the Sydney buyers, as you say, they're very active at the moment, but far more cautious than they were during the boom years. You've got this borrowing capacity, which is tightened, as I mentioned. Budgets have reduced by around 10 to 15% for some buyers, and properties with problems are on the market for much longer. What are your thoughts around all of that?
Yeah, we are seeing the days on market blowing out a bit more. I mean, Sydney used to be an average of 42 days, but then when we had COVID, it went down to 10 days. And beginning of the year, it was around 32 days. So it is trending upwards now. And that's as a result of seeing more listings coming on the market. SQM Research just put out their data and they're seeing quite a significant rise in listings. And that's because people are fearing that the market conditions could get worse. And so they go, you know what, we need to sell. Let's do it sooner than later. So I think the other thing that we're seeing at the moment is the whole budget changes. should I buy new? Should I buy old? Is it a good time to wait? Should I just buy now? Am I catching a falling knife? All of these kind of typical scenarios that go through buyers' heads. But what I'm seeing out there is investors very much sitting on their hands. They're not really willing to take a punt. But at the same time, I'm out there looking myself to buy, and I'm very active. And I'm thinking, you know what? It's actually a wonderful time to buy because there's so much less competition, and you can get really good quality property at a discount to long-term value. One thing that's happened that people don't realise, just because there's been a tax change in the way that property taxes are treated, it doesn't mean that the fundamentals of the property market have changed. We still have an undersupplied market in Sydney and in Australia particularly. You have to be very cautious and selective about what you buy and where you buy. You mentioned in your opening about the top end of the market, and that market runs to the beat of its own drum. Essentially, it's not as affected by the economy or interest rates, and there's a very limited supply of prime waterfront type properties. Whereas the sort of the more premium market, as you say, between sort of 2.5 to 5 million, that market is much more susceptible to interest rates and the economy. And we're seeing there's significant discounts to be available to buyers in that range at the moment.
I got a subject here which I know is very close to your heart, and that is why buyers need strategy over emotion in softer markets.
Really good question to ask. And I think strategy comes to the heart of what you're doing. A lot of people go, hey, look, I've got 2 or 3 million to spend. Let me just jump onto realestate.com and see what's available. That's the worst thing you can do. You've got to be, even if you're buying your own home, you've got to be selective and got to be strategic about what you're buying. So what we're seeing at the moment, as I say, is a decline in some markets, not everywhere. So you need to have a really clear idea of the quality of property, the location of it, make sure its fundamentals are right, and all those long-term drivers are going to be there. A lot of people are saying, oh, look, I'm only going to buy new because I get the tax deductions. Well, go ahead and buy that, 250 square metre block of land out at Oran Park or wherever, right out in the western areas, and it will grow at a subservient rate at a much lower capital growth rate than the inner and middle ring suburbs.
Yeah, so some good thoughts there, Rich Harvey, who is in Sydney with us this morning. Up next, we'll talk about long-term property investing and property psychology.
Every morning from 6 a.m, we bring you the latest real estate news with diverse perspectives from leading industry experts. We deliver the most property podcasts across Australia every week. Know your property. Available for breakfast from 6 a.m.
Hey, this is interesting. Many Australians now are reporting lower life satisfaction than they experienced during the height of COVID lockdown years. Now, despite the restrictions of 2020, financial pressure today appears to be weighing far more heavily on households, creating growing stress around everyday life. This was in an ABC report that said that many Australians are now feeling the cost of the living crisis has surpassed 2020, and it has replaced the pandemic uncertainty with ongoing financial anxiety. I don't think any of us are too surprised by that. It is a Real Estate Friday. Rich Harvey in Sydney is with us. Long-term property investing despite short-term market cycles. Now, I mentioned that previous question being a bit of a favourite for yours. I know that this is something also that you can talk to.
The mistake that so many property buyers, whether you're buying a home or investment, that they fall into is following the herd. I get asked, when is the best time to buy? And I say that's the wrong question. The right time to buy is when you are ready. Yes, there are certain timings of the market that you can possibly do a little bit better, but at the end of the day, it's about when it works for you. You've got to get your borrowing capacity right. And at the moment, borrowing capacity is being crimped. I think we're in for at least another 1, maybe 2 more interest rate rises. So if you've got a pre-approval, use it or lose it, I say. Secondly, you've also got to look at the broader market conditions. And if you can buy when there's not many other people buying, that's a great time to buy. A bit like that great quote from Warren Buffett, who said, be greedy when others are fearful and fearful when others are greedy. I love representing clients in this kind of market because we can get much, much deeper discounts than we can when the market's really hot and you've got 10 people competing on the same property. But as I said earlier, the fundamentals of the property are we're undersupplied. The government is trying to achieve a 1.8 1.2 million home target, and they're going to fall short around 300,000 dwellings. I've done some research, which I released at the beginning of the year, Craig, called The Great Supply Crunch Coming. It's a free download on my website on propertybuyer.com.au that people can download. And I interviewed around 20 of the top economists across Australia. And my thesis is simply this, is that we are not building enough homes, construction costs are too high, planning rules are very complex, we're going to fall way short. So I think in the short term, we're going to see very significant rent rises, more than 5% per annum, which is going to be very attractive for investors. Unfortunately, more investors will be scared away from the market because they're not looking at the long-term factors. I think it's going to become harder for the younger generation to get into the market rather than easier because of the changes that have come in.
Now, you've been in the market for a long, long time. I'm not giving away your age here, but you have seen a lot of different cycles. How different is this particular cycle? Because it's very unique what is going on, isn't it? Or would you argue that we've seen this in the past, something like this? Not the same, obviously, but these big bang geopolitical situations that unfold.
Yeah, you're right, Craig. Look, we have seen this movie before, but there's different actors and there's different factors that play. We've got a major change in the way tax is being levied on investment property. It hasn't affected all property. There's no change to commercial property. You're buying in your self-managed super fund, which is a wonderful opportunity for investors out there. But then you've got persistently high interest rates right across the world. We've got very low productivity growth and we've got sluggish wages. So there's a confluence of factors here, which is going to see a depressed market for a short period of time. But the minute or the second we sense any kind of decline in interest rates, you watch the market reignite quite rapidly. Just like we've seen consumer confidence really drop away quite sharply, like it was heading up to around 94 basis points and now it's down to back to the 80% market, which means people are not feeling wealthy. The minute we start to see the consumer feel a bit more confident, the property market will resume.
And you talked about if the interest rates start to come down, just how quickly things can bounce back. Having a look at the millennials, the Gen Xers, the younger generation, it feels to me like they're reacting even faster these days to some good news. Is there an argument in any of that?
Well, I think, with the onset of AI, we live in such an instantaneous society, and the people that do respond earlier are the technology adopters, which is typically the millennials and the younger generation. So, their adoption of technology and changes to information is much faster than the older generation. So I think, yes, they tend to believe clickbaits, they tend to believe what's on Instagram feeds, so they are going to respond a lot quicker with their fingers to what's happening in the market. However, you don't believe everything you read in the papers, right? And I've been around many, many decades, and you've got to take a much longer term view. So I think the younger generation have an opportunity to get in. I think it's actually going to be a bit harder, unfortunately, for them. And I think the bank of mum and dad's going to play a much bigger role going forward in the future role of property ownership in this country. But yeah, I think that they're more ready to get in and have a crack, particularly if the government say, hey, we're trying to help new home buyers. But, abolishing near to gearing actually means it's harder for younger people to buy established property because they can't offset any kind of losses on established property. They're being forced to buy brand new, as I said, which may not be the best option. The other thing that's happening for the first time buyer market is the 5% deposit scheme. That particular market, all the caps, if you think of Sydney, 1.5 is the cap, Brisbane, Melbourne's 1 million. The acceleration of property prices toward those caps is incredible. That's really pulled forward about 5 years worth of demand in 1 year. So it's still very competitive in that lower price point.
Plenty of great points that you are making. Rich Harvey, we will wrap it up there on our Friday morning. Thanks for coming back onto the Real Estate Breakfast and enjoy the upcoming weekend.
Thank you, Craig. I really appreciate it. If anyone wants to get more, you can tap into my own podcast on the Property Buyer podcast online. Thank you, Craig.
Listen to expert perspectives with exclusive real estate conversations and supercharge your knowledge base with us. We connect you to the best real estate information across Australia. The Real Estate Podcast.